The content you are about to listen to includes graphic descriptions of injury, death, and suicide. Please use discretion if these are topics you find triggering. Previously on What Happened to Ralph Bell. I'll admit, this felt significant. A forensic expert could surely see the evidence with more clarity than a journalist like myself or even the average person. I wanted to help the family get answers. And this felt like it could lead to a breakthrough that would help the family get justice for Ralph. A little over an hour later, Dr. Wecht called us back. He looked through all the files we sent. His answer? Well, that was a surprise I did not expect. This is what happened to Ralph Bell. Ralph Bell's family lost him 4 years ago. Since the day he disappeared, they've been convinced something terrible happened to him. They wanted answers. And even the discovery of his body and the confirmation of his death, it didn't bring them peace. Ralph's death was ruled a suicide. But there were questions his family felt were never answered. Like, how could Ralph's injuries be self-inflicted? And how could someone suffering from fatal injuries have the strength to put the knife they cut themselves with back in their pocket? When I began to look at this case, I hoped to help them find those answers. I reviewed the case files. I attempted to speak with the authorities. I interviewed his family. So when Dr. Sarah Wecht, a forensic pathologist, attorney, and medical legal consultant, agreed to look at Ralph's case, I emailed him the files I had. The files I shared included police reports, Ralph's text logs, search warrants for Ralph's apartment, DNA testing from the BCA, and the medical examiner's report. Based on those files, Dr. Wecht said he understood why the medical examiner ruled it a suicide. Now, what was missing from those files was actual photos of Ralph's autopsy. So Dr. Wecht couldn't actually look at Ralph's injuries for himself. He could only read what had been written by the medical examiner. I requested access to those photos, but the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office declined my request. However, based on the files Dr. Wecht did have access to, he said some of the evidence was odd. He went on to give context. Ralph was found with multiple injuries on his body. His mother describes them for us.
Are you comfortable with going through what injuries he had?
Stab wounds.
And where?
Multiple stab wounds. When he had a stab wound to his right abdomen, and one to the chest, but he also had multiple cuts on both the wrists and under the neck.
He had cuts. Can you go over that one more time?
He had multiple cuts on both the wrists. He had multiple cuts under his neck. He had stab in his side and a stab in the chest.
So for me, when I looked at that, and I think that was the hardest part for me to look at the evidence and then look at the cause of death. And it's very hard to understand how a person could stab themselves that many times and fold the knife up and put it back in their pocket.
I've been feeling the same way for 3 years.
Dr. Wecht helped us understand why he thinks the medical examiner ruled Ralph's death a suicide. The report we sent him describes superficial cuts on Ralph's arm and neck as hesitation marks. Dr. Wecht explained that when a person attempts to cut themselves, they'll often work their way up to a deeper cut, building a sort of confidence as they see that the act is working. As an expert, Dr. Wecht did find some additional aspects of the case file unusual. He couldn't explain why the knife police say Ralph used to stab himself had been folded up and placed into the pocket of his jacket. He also didn't understand why it took so long to begin searching for Ralph given the condition his car was found in on the night he disappeared. Even with these inconsistencies, Dr. Wecht said he didn't disagree with the report. So how do we make sense of all of this? When I interviewed Ralph's mother, Korea Taylor, I asked her if she'd taken her concerns about Ralph's death back to the investigators.
And so did you raise those concerns to detectives?
I have. I called the detective a few months ago, and I asked him, have they ever thought about considering reopen his case? And he told me that, that's how some families are. It's hard for them to accept suicidal. I told him, but if it was something that I knew for a fact and I felt, I would accept that. But in this condition, I just don't accept that. It's hard for me to accept.
And so that was it. That they just made that determination that he committed suicide, and
that's it for them.
You have advocated to have his case reopened. Have you received any support? Where have you taken those demands? Have you gone to, obviously you shared that with the detectives, but are there other people that you've gone to ask that this case be reopened and reinvestigated?
I've been reached out to so many people. I've been trying to get support from a lot of people. And I know his case is weird,
From the very beginning, Ralph's family felt police treated them in a way that suggested Ralph simply left his family. This brings us back to something that stuck with me. There are clear steps for law enforcement to follow when deciding to file a missing persons report. If looked at objectively, the Stillwater Police Department should have taken action faster. That assumption that Ralph simply left created a lack of urgency to find him despite his family's concerns about foul play.
And so did you have any suspicions? Did you think that he had been killed or kidnapped? Like what were, could you just, put me in your mind? What were some of the things that you were thinking may have happened to him during those few months where he was missing?
At that moment, after he had been gone missing for a couple of days, I was thinking, oh, maybe he's hiding for something, or maybe somebody threatened him so he's gotten out of the way, or something like that. I just didn't know. I didn't want to assume anything. But the realism after all of that was I knew something had happened to him. What I didn't know. And why haven't anybody saw it? That seemed very suspicious to me because he worked every day. And people where he lived at out Stillwater would see him come and go all the time. So I don't see how anybody could miss that day. No track, nowhere to be found. They couldn't even really get a good trace on a cell phone. So all of those things very just out of place to me.
Looking at this case as an investigative journalist, I felt from the beginning there were so many inconsistencies with this case, and I truly hoped we'd find answers. With Dr. Wecht, we thought we found them, but he wasn't looking at the complete picture. He needed the autopsy photos, and we reached a dead end trying to get them. But Dr. Wecht wasn't the only one I talked to. A retired major crimes investigator met with me on several occasions to review Ralph Bell's complete case file. I had hoped to get him to go on the record, but he was concerned for his safety. He concluded that the investigation had several holes, and he was concerned if he criticized the work of former colleagues, there may be blowback. Ultimately, he believed the investigators didn't follow all the leads. Now, with all that I've come to understand about this investigation, what happened to Ralph Bell is inconclusive. According to Ralph's family, the Stillwater Police Department and their assigned investigators approached his disappearance and ultimately his death with an underlying belief that Ralph, on some level, chose to leave. But why was that the immediate line of thought they followed? One of the things we have to look at is the implicit bias that's often leveled at Black people in general, but especially within the context of policing. There's seemingly an automatic assumption of guilt that's placed on us when police are involved. This bias plays out strongly when Black people go missing. The Black and Missing Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to bring awareness to missing people of color. Their founder, Derica Wilson, explains that. Too often, police label missing Black people, including children, as runaways or suggest that they're involved in criminal activity. And with most police agencies allocating minimal resources to missing persons units, people of color are more likely to fall through the cracks. Often, missing Black adults are associated with criminal activity, gangs, and drugs, whether they had any connections to these things or not. It's also assumed that Black adults come from low-income conditions, as though it equals crime being a part of their everyday lives. This makes it even easier to connect disappearances to a personal failing versus an act committed against them. Ralph's uncle Lucius felt strongly that this was the perception from police.
You know, the other thing that I can't help but think about is the ongoing cries for justice in Minnesota, specifically in regards to the way police departments treat communities of color. Do you feel like this case was treated differently because Ralph is a Black man?
Yes, from the start of it, I did. Simply because when they reported Ralph missing, the police department didn't seem to take any value in it. They didn't. It was around Christmas time. They didn't start the investigation. He came up missing on the 9th, I believe it was, and they didn't start the investigation until after the 26th, after Christmas, the day after Christmas.
So they didn't take the reports of him missing seriously.
Exactly.
Another issue with the perception of bias is that it closes the door to further questions. Many of the inconsistencies surrounding the Ralph Bell investigation may never be answered. There are still questions around Ralph's missing cell phone. It was never recovered. On top of that, there was the highly unusual circumstances around the destruction of the abandoned vehicle that was never explained. In the previous episode, it was laid out that Ralph's uncle, Lucius Taylor, was technically the owner of the car that Ralph was driving. During his interview, he mentioned that instead of having the car returned at the end of the investigation, which would have been standard, it was destroyed.
I don't know because what they did with the car was they took the car and at first they told me not to come get it because the car was still in my name. Then they told me that they were still holding the vehicle because it was part of an ongoing investigation thing. So they held it for more than 30 days. Then the tow bill got up to like $1,600 or $1,700. Then they called me and said, "Well, you can come get it now." And I asked, "Well, am I responsible for any tolls?" And they said, "Yes, the bill is $1,600 and something." Well, I went to Stillwater and talked with the police department there and asked them, why am I responsible for that toll bill when the car should have been released to me in the first place?
But they did, which is why police requested the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to help with the investigation. You're listening to What Happened to Ralph Bell. After interviewing Kayla, she shared with us files investigators had given her, including several videos of police interviewing her and her father inside her home.
Camera recording started.
Here's audio of investigators examining the impounded car on December 28th, which happened to be Ralph's 24th birthday and 8 days after he went missing.
The best way to get into it, I think we're just going to go in from... Okay, you got your camera? Go ahead, take a couple inside there. And if you can see it and shoot that phone case. Yep. Look at that too. Looks like two pieces. Looks like it's intact.
Investigator Young sees a for sale sign in the back seat and picks it up to read it.
05 Chevy Malibu Max. Contact Luke. That's Uncle Luke. That's his car. Please text me at this number. Okay. Stinks like weed.
But I'm saying, I asked him, well, why am I being charged anything? Why don't cities pick that up? And I said, well, because you live in Ramsey County. Like, well, that has nothing to do with it. So they kept giving me the runaround. And then pretty soon, they sent a letter after the fact that the car was towed, impounded, and then they destroyed the car. But this car, we're talking about a vehicle that was in good running condition. And they destroyed the vehicle. They took it and crushed it. But what me and my sister also found was suspicious is that Ralph's cell phone was never found, or that we know of. It was never brought up where his cell phone was.
So I'm guessing you never had to pay because the car was destroyed. Did they give you any documentation, any record of the destruction of the vehicle?
No, they didn't.
Beyond the unanswered questions, there's still the matter of the people left behind when a tragedy like this occurs. Ralph Bell had a life. He had people who cared about him, who loved him. And when something happens to a person you care about, it's only natural to question things. Ralph's girlfriend, Kayla Raycotts, struggled as the length of his disappearance went on.
And then with it dragging on, I was listening to people. I was listening to social media. I was listening to a lot of stuff. And I'm not going to lie, there was a time where I questioned. I was like, did he? And if he did, it would have been my fault. I'm the one that made him mad. But then I got to thinking about it again. And he would never leave his kids. So no, I don't think he did. I don't think his investigation was done properly. I don't think that his medical exam or his autopsy was done correctly. I think that they failed him completely.
People grieve differently. And given the difficulty surrounding Ralph's death, it's only natural that the grief process for Ralph's family has a range of emotions. This is Ralph's sister, Isabella Taylor. She struggled to reconcile what she was told with her experience of her brother she knew and loved.
And so, I mean, do you think your brother committed suicide, or do you think that something happened to him?
Oh, no, I don't think he did that to himself. No. No, I don't think so.
And can you share with us why you feel that way?
I feel that way because, I mean, even just when I seen him and just the type of person he is, when I see him that night, he didn't seem odd or anything. We was speaking about the future.
Ralph's uncle Lucius was left with a sense of relief that quickly turned negative.
So, When you did find out that his body was found, what went through your mind?
Well, there was a sigh of relief that he was found, but also a dreadful feeling also. I felt really, really bad, you know, because we waited under restraint for a long time to get a resolve, and that was the end result as far as we know, but we still didn't know what happened. So that piece of the pie is still missing.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't know what happened. They ruled it as a suicide, but we just don't believe that because there's too much things that went unexplained.
And his mother, Korea, well, she just misses her son.
Could you just talk about like the emotional and the spiritual toll that took on you, and I imagine your family as well?
It did. It took a large toll on not just me, but the whole family, his sister, his brothers. And it been 3 years and it's still weighing on me because I feel I haven't gotten closure yet because I actually don't know what happened to him. So that make it even harder for me. So every day is still a challenge for us.
Did things change within the family? Like, for example, could you detail how this impacted people? Like, I'll just throw out an example. Maybe, let's say you were working a job and then when he came up missing, you're like, I can't do this. I just got to focus 100% of my time on finding my son. Or maybe with Kayla, maybe she was going to school and then when this happened, she dropped out. Was there any impacts like that within the immediate family that this had on individuals?
It did. It took a toll on me, but I had to still get up and I still went to work, when I can and everything. But it was hard. And we still, like I said, it's still hard for me. I struggle every day. It's still a struggle for me.
And his loss not only took away from his family, but also took away experiences he was looking forward to.
Ralph was also a father.
He was.
How many children does he have?
Before he went missing, he had 2 girls. He had a son that was on the way. So he's a father of 3 babies.
Has it been difficult with his son knowing that he never got a chance to meet his father?
It is. Yeah, I was just with them last night and just being with the new baby. And, he wasn't here at the time Raph went miss, but he still acknowledges him. Even if he see his picture, he be like, Dada. As if he knows him. And it breaks my heart. Yeah.
How about his other 2 children, his daughters?
They love, the girls, they love their Dada. And they still, every time they always want to look at his pictures and videos and just remember the moments that they had with him.
Sometimes all you can do is reflect and somehow hope that grief can be channeled into wisdom.
For people who are just learning about Ralph Bell for the first time, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to take away from this story?
Well, that when you lose someone close and dear to you, you need to pay close attention to that person because that person usually is giving off signs. And if you don't recognize, then, that's where the mystery starts at right there. So I'm thinking that there was trouble and people misread it.
Ralph Bell was a young man with a whole future ahead of him. He had a family who loved him and who miss him to this day. His life was complicated, but that can be said about anyone. He didn't deserve to have his disappearance treated with such little urgency by police. He didn't deserve to have so many lingering questions around his death, and at this point, those questions may never be answered. In the end, Ralph was a person who deserved dignity. He deserved the best efforts the authorities had to offer to find him, and his family deserved the respect that should be extended to anyone who has a loved one that is missing. Ultimately, Ralph Bell's life, his disappearance, and his death were not treated with the dignity he deserved. This has been a Georgia Fort and Black Press production, hosted by myself, Georgia Fort, production support provided by Matriarch Digital Media, produced by Twyla Dang, and edited by Zara Abdilal. To learn more about Black Press, head to our website at blackpress.llc. That's BLCK Press.llc.